So Robert Kiyosaki is once again making waves in the Bitcoin space, recently predicting Bitcoin could actually hit $300,000. But he's not the only one predicting that Bitcoin can see a 600% rally to that very specific $300,000 figure. So we're going to be breaking down and exposing who these three billionaires and big profile names in the space are. We're going to start off with looking at Robert Kiyosaki. Okay, so we can see here in this article that we dropped literally yesterday that Kiyosaki reacts to Bitcoin price surge, predicting $300,000 by year end. Okay, so we can see the renowned author and financial guru Robert Kiyosaki has once again made headlines, and this was because of something he actually tweeted over on Twitter. So if we come on over and have a look at Kiyosaki's tweet, we can see Kiyosaki says, Bitcoin on fire. The biggest mistake you can make is to procrastinate. It's important to start. Even if you only have $500, the next stop is $300,000 per Bitcoin. And Kiyosaki actually believes this can happen in 2024. Okay. Now, what's most interesting about Kiyosaki is he's obviously famous for turning literally $600 into millions of dollars. Okay. That's what Kiyosaki is kind of famous for. He's also famous for one of his books called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. But again, Kiyosaki is not the only analyst to come out and be very, very bullish on Bitcoin. This again is another article that we published this week. It was literally yesterday, in fact, and we have the BitGo chief is now warning that Bitcoin investors are unprepared for a 600% surge. Okay. Again, this is very interesting because this isn't the first kind of person to come out and say nobody's prepared for what's coming this cycle. Okay. This cycle is the first one where we've seen Bitcoin actually hit an all-time high before the Bitcoin halving. Again, this has never happened before in Bitcoin's life. And again, last bear market was also the first time in Bitcoin's life that it ever dropped below its previous all-time high. Okay. Remember, Bitcoin's bear market low was at $15,000. And this was below the all-time high of $20,000 that we set in 2017. So they're already two unprecedented events or data points that prove that something's a little bit different this time, okay? So again, we're going to be discussing what could be a little bit different this time in just a second. First, let's break down this prediction, the second prediction we're going to be covering today. And this is actually coming from BitGo chief, okay? And his name is Mike Belch. So we can see in a recent interview, he criticized investors who exhibited shaky resolve during recent market corrections. He emphasized that the significance of resilience in the face of volatility, saying if you can't handle a 20% Bitcoin dip, you're definitely unprepared for a 600% surge, okay? Now, again, he believes that we're going to see this because of the institutional capital that is flooding into the space, okay? Nobody is prepared for the institutional capital that is coming. He also added that we have observed the entry of smaller hedge funds with larger hedge funds set to follow suit. Okay, we can see pension funds are showing interest and endowments are already actively participating. Okay, so this is interesting. Now, this is the second person who this week predicted that we're going to actually see again, very specific 600% surge to $300,000. Is there something special about that number? We're going to get there in a minute. We really are. I want to cover the rest of this article here because we have the third person who's actually predicting, again, a 600% surge to $300,000 recently actually came out, okay? And it was actually someone associated with Tether. So if we scroll down here, we can see that Kiyosaki's predictions aligns with sentiments from other experts in the digital asset space. William Quigley, co-founder of Tether, has also predicted that Bitcoin would reach $300,000. Again, what is special about this number? I don't know, but we can see that we actually have a video that I want to share for you guys, actually breaking down William Quigley's recent prediction. Again, this has all come out this week, Strange timing, strange number that's been kind of pinned on the donkey, so to say. But let's listen to a little bit of this interview, and I'm going to give you guys my thoughts throughout it.
On Worldwide Asset Exchange and Tether co-founder William Quigley's with us. William, it's good to see you again. I wonder, I mean, this is another story where there is arguments on the speculative side, but also on fundamental analysis of at least money flows.
Yeah, I agree. If you look at where we are pre-halvening, that's going to happen in April, where Bitcoin's reward for miners drops by half. If we look at where we are versus the last one, I'd say, which happened 4 years ago, we're in better shape. You know, obviously we didn't have the ETFs back then. If you look at things like derivative volume, it was nascent 4 years ago, now very high. We've just hit a record. And the ETF flows have actually surprised me. I was a little skeptical that they would take off quickly. And now we have close to, I want to say $50 billion. It's about 740,000 Bitcoin held in these ETFs. Daily, we're getting between 150 million up to $500 million flowing in. So there's a lot of positive forces that are pushing Bitcoin up right now. And this is before the halvening, which is usually after that fact when Bitcoin really skyrockets.
So Mr. Quigley mentioned something very interesting there, okay? He's saying that the Bitcoin ETF flows have surprised him, and this is why he has now kind of upped his Bitcoin prediction to $300,000. But let's not forget, William Quigley isn't the only person who's been surprised by these Bitcoin ETF flows, okay? The CEO of BlackRock himself, Larry Fink, was actually on the press circuit literally this week as well. And I don't think I've actually showed you guys this video, but even Mr. Larry, big old Larry Fink, was also very surprised about the Bitcoin ETF flow. So if you missed this video, I'm going to quickly play it for you. Again, if you've seen it, this is a good one to watch.
On the long-term viability of Bitcoin.
I was going to say, did that surprise you?
That surprised me how much that's gone up. I mean, look, it is. We're creating now a market that has more liquidity, more transparency, and I'm pleasantly surprised, and I would never have predicted it before we filed it, that we were going to see this type of retail demand.
So you thought you'd do good, but not this good.
I thought, yes.
Well, IBIT is your ETF over at iShares.
Yes.
It's about to overtake Grayscale, which was in the business certainly a lot longer. You look at the gains since January 11th when it first came about.
Yes.
Have you ever seen this much inflow this quickly into
IBIT is the fastest growing ETF in the history of ETFs.
Have a think about that for a minute. That is a pretty good note to pause that video on. IBIT is the fastest growing ETF in the history of ETFs. But even Larry Fink was surprised by just how well these Bitcoin spot ETFs have been performing, okay? Larry Fink is slowly starting to actually get a glimpse into what's happening in the Bitcoin space, okay? Again, we are very, very early in this Bitcoin bull market. We're going to be talking about just how early we are in a second by going through a pretty cool little chart I do have for you guys. This is one of my favorite charts, but we are certainly early. Erickson chimes in. It's great to be here today with you guys. 21 million secret society. That is a little bit what it feels like to be involved in Bitcoin today, even in 2024. It is still early. And even the world's largest asset manager was surprised by just how well his ETFs have actually been performing. So it's great to have you here, Erickson. It is great to have a Johnny Midas, another regular in the chat, which is nice to see. But let's talk about just how early it actually might be here today with Bitcoin, okay? So again, this is the Wall Street cheat sheet. Now, I think this is interesting because it kind of shows you the emotions that you see in these bull markets. So I think the emotions that you see on this chart here, they're pretty representative of every Bitcoin cycle, okay? I haven't been around for all of them, but I've been here for the 2017 and the 2021 cycles. And I can tell you this cheat sheet is actually a pretty good reflection of what's happening right now. So I think that right now, today, we are actually in kind of the phase of disbelief and hope. Okay, now if I were to kind of remove my big head out of the way here, you can kind of see where hope is on the cheat sheet. Now, this kind of signifies Bitcoin getting above an all-time high. And, you know, when we start getting above that all-time high, we start to see what we're discussing today. We see all of these predictions from people with a lot of money and a lot of reputation start to come in. And now we have, you know, Kiyosaki, the co-founder of Tether, and even the BitGo chief coming out and all predicting in the same week Bitcoin's going to hit $300,000 a coin. Okay. Now, again, who knows where the price of Bitcoin is going to go? We don't have a clue. I don't have a clue. Nobody knows where the price of Bitcoin is going to go in the short or the medium term. But again, like $300,000 a coin, it's a pretty big prediction to be sticking out there. And we typically did not have predictions like this in the middle of the bear market. Okay. Now, again, on the cheat sheet here, nobody in the bear market at the very bottom, when Bitcoin's capitulating and there's anger and depression involved, nobody's making these massive Bitcoin price predictions. But I think that we're kind of like, I think we're in the hope or the disbelief phase of a Bitcoin bull market. Now you can see we're maybe even in the optimistic phase of the Bitcoin bull market, but I don't think we're at the euphoria stage yet. Okay, so you can see here that this is typically when a bubble peaks. Now, again, it doesn't feel like euphoria yet today. Okay, I was actually living with a Bitcoin buddy of mine back in 2021, and I can remember distinctly what euphoria feels like. Okay, I don't really pay much attention to the Bitcoin price, but every single day Bitcoin was up like $5,000, and we were like sitting there calculating, oh, if Bitcoin goes here, we're going to be worth X amount. And it was very, very, very euphoric. And at the time, everybody, all the Ubers you're getting into where they were talking about Bitcoin, everybody, even people who had no idea what Bitcoin was, they were making tons of money by buying NFTs and JPEGs, and everybody's calling the Bitcoin maximalists stupid in the peak of a bull market. During Twitter Spaces actually launched in 2021. And I can remember I was actually called a Neanderthal for being a Bitcoin maximalist in 2021, because all the Bitcoin maxis, we would go into these Twitter Spaces and try to like save the degenerative crypto crowds. And we would go into these like crypto altcoin spaces and we'd be like, hey, you know, great, you've made some money, that's, you know, great, but you know, all of these tokens are probably going to trend to zero and lose 99% of their value over the next 2 years. And everybody thought we were absolutely crazy. Okay, now again, I don't think this is the current narrative right now. Okay, yes, there's a little bit of euphoria going on, but it's certainly not what you see in the peak of a bull market. Now, I wanted to address that because I know a lot of people are actually worried that maybe we are in a euphoric phase of the Bitcoin bull market. I just do not think that is true. I think OK Good makes a great point here. Robert Kiyosaki is always making crazy statements. This is true. He's been calling for a market crash since 2008. Again, this is you know, good intel to be aware of, and this is why we never trust any one individual's Bitcoin price predictions. I got to give Kiyosaki a little bit of props where props is due. He's been pretty bullish on Bitcoin even in the bear market, so I'll give that to him at least. But we can see that Colin actually believes that we are in the disbelief to hope phase. So again, very interesting. I'd love to hear from you guys in the chat. Let us know what part of the Bitcoin bull market you actually think we're in. Now, again, some people might even think we're still in a bear market. There are people in the space who think this is still a crazy bear market rally, like Capo, who's got, what, 1 million followers on Twitter. He thinks we're still headed down at $12,000. I probably disagree with him, even though I like to shy away from price predictions. But blow the chat up with where you think we are in this Bitcoin cycle. But I do think the fact that we're seeing all of these predictions coming out from these entities is kind of emblematic of the fact that we are in these early stages of a Bitcoin bull market. Now, again, we only played you guys half of this video from Mr. Quigley, co-founder of Tether, who believes we can go to $300,000 at the peak of the next bull run. I want to play the rest of it. We only got 90 seconds in before I went off on a tangent, but I think there's one more interesting nugget I want to discuss from this interview in particular. And again, notice how quickly the price of Bitcoin shot back up this week. This interview happened this week and Bitcoin was at $66,000. We're already back above 70, I think. So we're going to pause price prediction talk for a moment. We're going to and listen to the rest of this interview.
How do you describe to viewers the mix of institutional versus retail interest vis-a-vis, say, prior rallies?
Oh, anything from like pre-2020, there was very little institutional interest in Bitcoin. It was a retail-driven, globally retail-driven phenomenon. And now I would say there is a lot of institutional money that tracks it. It's also why you see such interest in derivatives. The volatility in Bitcoin, I think, is one thing that really attracts a lot of institutional investors. And you have to understand that, Bitcoin is maybe the only globally traded asset that I know of whose demand is purely based on sentiment. There's not a Bitcoin company. There isn't Bitcoin price earning ratios. It's just a sentiment driven token. And what you can say about that, of course, is that sentiment has no limits. You can always be more optimistic. And so this rally may be the biggest we've seen. If we just look at where we stand today, pre-halving for Bitcoin, and look at historical patterns, that would suggest, and I'm not predicting this, I'm just saying if you applied the historical patterns, it would suggest Bitcoin being in excess of $300,000 at the peak of this next bull market. And since all tokens are correlated to Bitcoin, that means that all the other tokens like Ethereum and...
Oh, no, he's going to go there. He's not going to start shilling crypto, is he? Well, we're not even going to let him shill the crypto. I think it's very interesting that he's kind of talking about previous cycles. And I think while we are talking about previous cycles, I want to show you guys this other article that we dropped on our website as well, okay? So this is also talking about Bitcoin breaking tradition. So you can see the headline of the article, Bitcoin cycle breaks tradition. 21 shares anticipates an early Bitcoin rally. So let's dive into this one because I think this is very interesting to kind of cover, okay? Because everybody's talking about the Bitcoin cycles, everybody's talking about what comes next, and nobody really knows what's happening. But 21 shares broke down they wrote a very in-depth PDF report, and you guys can see it here. I'm really trying to blow it up as big as I can for you guys because I think there's some really interesting charts that they include in it. But if we scroll down, we can actually see they show us what's normally happening in the Bitcoin cycles, and they actually show that we're kind of ahead of what has happened in previous Bitcoin halving cycles, which is again very, very interesting. Now, again, I think this kind of ties into another discussion we want to hit on in a minute, but I first want to show you this chart here that's comparing the growth of the Bitcoin ETFs to the gold ETFs. So you guys can see it. The Bitcoin ETFs is the smaller one. At the time of this report, Bitcoin ETFs were at 55 billion, and we can see the gold ETFs are at 96 billion. Again, the significance of this is that the gold ETFs have been live for over 20 years. The Bitcoin ETFs have been live for 60 days, which is absolutely incredible that Bitcoin is already more than half of the value of the gold ETFs. Okay, and this is again very, very interesting. Now, again, that's not the specific chart I wanted to show you. I just wanted to kind of show you that these guys are highlighting the fact that there's just not a lot of Bitcoin on exchanges. And what we're seeing today is something we haven't seen before, which is why we have 21 shares saying, look, we could be about to break tradition with this early Bitcoin rally that we're seeing in the space today. Now, we actually talked about the possibility of Bitcoin repeating what it did in the 2013 Bitcoin bull market, where we saw two parabolic pumps. If you do want to learn a little bit more about that topic, we released a video on that one literally earlier in the week. If I were to share the tab, you guys can see it's the one with Michael Saylor on screen here. And with all that said, we hope you guys enjoy that video. Thank you to everyone who joined in the chat today. It looks as if we have a lot of the regulars in the chat. We have OK Good saying yes. We don't have a lot of retail euphoria or speculation and interest in the space today, which is very interesting. So I'll just leave you guys on that cliffhanger. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you guys in the next live stream.